IT 0484 bis T, the prosecutor versus Ramush Haradinaj, Idriz Balaj, and Lahi Brahimaj.
Thank you very much. May we please have the appearances for the day, starting with the prosecution.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Your Honours. Paul Rogers for the prosecution, appearing together with Mr. Aditya Menon, Ms. Barbara Goy, Ms. Daniela Kravitz, and our case manager, Ms. Lena Pedersen.
Thank you very much. And for Mr. Haradinaj.
Good afternoon, Your Honour. Ben Emerson for Ramush Haradinaj, together with Rodney Dixon, Andrew Strong, Annie O'Reilly, and Kerry Rowan.
Thank you so much. And for Mr. Balaj.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Gregor Guy Smith, Colleen Rohan, Holly Buchanan, Genti Zuberi, and our new intern, Ramon Baquero, appearing on behalf of Mr. Idriz Balaj.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guy Smith. And for Mr. Brahimaj.
Good afternoon, Your Honours. Richard Harvey, together with Paul Troop, Luke Bonish, and Sylvie Kinabo, on behalf of Mr. Brahimaj.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harvey. I guess we all know why we are here today, to hear closing arguments from the parties. Mr. Rogers.
Your Honours, thank you. Your Honours, for your information, I expect to be between an hour and a half and 2 hours in my submissions. And Your Honours, I've attempted to try to ensure that as much of this can be in open session as possible. Having said that, immediately there is a matter I just want to deal very briefly with in private session before I start the fullness of my submissions.
May the Chamber please move into private session.
Your Honours, we're in open session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Registrar. Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Your Honours. Your Honours, in my submissions, I will present an overview first of the case against the accused. Secondly, I will address the crimes in summary at Yablanitsa. Third, I will make some remarks about the assessment of witness evidence in general and some specific issues relating to witness 3 and the protected witness. Fourthly, I will turn to the issue of the accused's criminal responsibility. And fifthly and finally and briefly, will make some remarks in relation to sentence. Your Honours, turning to the overview, Your Honours, the crimes the subject of this indictment and for which the 3 accused, Ramush Haradinaj, Idriz Balaj, and Lahi Brahimaj, are criminally responsible, occurred as part of the brutal elimination of opposition by the KLA to which they subscribed. The accused were senior and respected commanders in the KLA. Together, they pursued the elimination of opposition by mistreating, torturing, and murdering perceived opponents at the Yablanitsa prison. This was a small facility located in one of only 2 buildings on a small plot of land on the edge of Yablanitsa village. Due to its size, for those members of the KLA attending that place, it was, we submit, impossible not to know what was going on. The close cooperation of the 3 accused, aided by the strong familial ties between Mr. Haradinaj and Lahi Brahimaj, ensured and encouraged the continued use of the Yablanitsa prison facility throughout the indictment period to pursue this unlawful enterprise. Ramush Haradinaj was, throughout, a highly respected KLA commander in the Dukagjin area of western Kosovo. His family home was in Glodjane. His stalwart defense of it in March 1998 against a concerted attack by Serbian forces propelled him to almost godlike status within the region. As Chief Krasniki, a KLA soldier, put it, P54, paragraphs 40 to 43, quote, "This incident gave Ramush Haradinaj immense popularity in Kosovo," quote. He went on, quote, "The attack on Gllogjan was the first public victory for the guerrilla KLA army," end quote. And he said, quote, "After this incident, the village of Glodjane became the most respected UCK, UCK or KLA headquarters after Yablanitsa, end quote. And finally, quote, Glodjane was accepted as the focal point of the KLA in the whole Pejë and Deçan, and Ramush Haradinaj as the popular commander of the UCK forces in the Dukagjin area, end quote. Not far from Glodjane lay the home of Ramush Haradinaj's maternal uncle, Lahi Brahimaj. He too was a powerful KLA commander based in the more remote and secure location of Yablanitsa. Idriz Balaj was the commander of a special unit known as the Black Eagles. He was the trusted lieutenant of Ramush Haradinaj, even known as Togeri, meaning lieutenant. As Haradinaj's trusted lieutenant, Balaj was an important link between Brahimaj and Haradinaj. As commander of the feared Black Eagles, a unit under the direct command of Ramush Haradinaj, Balaj reported directly to Haradinaj. He was seen together with Haradinaj regularly. He was regarded as very close to Haradinaj, a view shared by both those within the KLA and the Serbian intelligence services. So close was this relationship that KLA soldiers needed special permission from Haradinaj to visit Balaj and his Black Eagles. Zoran Stijević referred to Balaj as basically a bodyguard of Ramush Haradinaj. He said, quote, he and his group were constantly by the side of Ramush Haradinaj, end quote. That's at P122, transcript 9073. Whilst the accused were in part fighting a war to achieve control of the Dukagjin zone, from the outset they pursued that aim by a mixture of legitimate military action and the illegitimate, illegal targeting of civilians suspected as spies and collaborators, and those considered opponents of the KLA. For liability under a joint criminal enterprise, it is sufficient for the aim to be achieved through criminal means. Your Honours, I will deal later with the accused's position and responsibility, but I'll summarise this now. Ramush Haradinaj, through his position of authority, arising from the respect accorded to him as a hero and a commander, and through his strong family ties, was able to influence the conduct of others, and in particular his uncle, Lahi Brahimaj, Idriz Balaj, and the soldiers under their individual command. His endorsement and support for the elimination of opposition through illegal means, coupled with his position of authority and respect, acted as positive encouragement to the perpetrators of the crimes at Yablanitsa. His failure to use his authority and influence to stop the mistreatment, particularly after he assumed formal command of the facility in June 1998, coupled with his continuation of the repression of opposition by banning political activity of any party or association of a political nature, and by ordering the military police to root out collaborators, show his continued support for the repressive aims of the KLA. As commander from June 1998, he had a duty to protect those in the custody of his subordinates. Lahi Brahimaj was central to the operation of the oppressive regime of torture, mistreatment, abuse and murder at the Yablanitsa prison. His command of that facility, the soldiers in it, and his position of influence within the KLA and his family, together with his personal involvement in the direct perpetration of crimes against victims named in the indictment, including in ordering or instigating their murders, can leave no doubt as to his criminal responsibility under the indictment, and is the clearest possible evidence of the pursuit of the repressive aims of the KLA. Idriz Balaj's regular presence at the prison in Yablanitsa, his direct perpetration of crimes, his manifest relish for violence as demonstrated by his fearsome reputation, his behaviour towards others, such as in the FARC incidents set out in our brief at paragraphs 80 to 84, and in his stated aim of being present in Yablanitsa to kill people, as attested to by the protected witness, all demonstrate his commitment to the unlawful repression of opposition throughout the Dukagjin area. And by his conduct, he encouraged others. The shared intent of the three accused to eliminate collaborators, spies, and opponents of all types is manifest and obvious. To this end, in the context of this armed conflict, this included through torture, mistreatment, and murder. The accused worked together to achieve this end. Yablanitsa and Glodjane throughout cooperated closely together. Pjotr Shala and Skender Rexhametai testified that fighters from Yablanitsa provided to assistance to Gllogjan during the firefight at the Haradinaj compound in March 1998. I direct you to our brief, paragraphs 28 and 29. Zoran Stejovic testified that Haradinaj and other fighters retreated from Gllogjan to shelter at Yablanitsa. That's P121, paragraphs 41, P151, page 3, and P31, page 2. The mutual support offered by these family bases proved invaluable throughout the conflict and enabled the KLA forces to act in a coordinated and cohesive way. When Haradinaj consolidated his command over the two headquarters in June 1998, he issued orders that continued to implement measures to target those perceived as opponents of the KLA. He issued regulations, it's P349 and P190, directing the military police to seek out collaborators, and he instructed KLA commanders and the population at large to prevent any activity under pain of imprisonment that went to the detriment of their war, P196. The KLA, in which these accused commanded positions of influence, secured control by pursuing a number of strategies. Your Honour, I need to go into private session for this next quotation, please.
May the Chamber please move into private session. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Rogers.
The identification of collaborators, spies, and those considered opponents lay at the heart of the KLA's strategy to secure control of the territory they fought for. As a fledgling organisation, it needed to make its mark, to be recognised, and to be accepted. But its strategies included creating fear and operating a brutal regime of torture, cruel treatment, and murder, directed at those suspected as traitors, and spies, and collaborators, and others not supporting the KLA's aims. The protected witness stated not joining the KLA was risky for me, and that they wanted to have people under their control. The consistent witness evidence in this case shows that this brutal strategy was implemented in Yablanitsa and elsewhere in the Dukagjin zone. It can be seen demonstrated, for example, in the KLA clashes with the FARC soldiers, when Ramush Haradinaj attacked and shot a FARC soldier, and Idriz Balaj, with others, attacked and beat other FARC soldiers, those events taking place on the 4th of July 1998. It is shown through the attack on the Stojanovic brothers and others in Gllogjan, and the elimination of Zenun Gashi. And for further details, we direct your honours to paragraphs 77 to 85 of our brief. And it is seen most obviously in the torture, cruel treatment, and murder of the victims named in the indictment at Yablanitsa, of course, variously, the various crimes. Contemporary KLA communiques, dating from before the beginning of the armed conflict and after, in which the killing of collaborators were announced and the operation of blacklists leave no room for uncertainty as to the fate to befall those suspected of collaboration. And we direct your honours again to our brief at paragraphs 52 to 61. The fact that blacklists were operating before the formal unification of Ramush Haradinaj's command over both Glodjane and Yablanitsa, and that shared resources across the two commands were used to target opponents. For example, in May 1998, Faton Mehmetai from Glodjane and Pieter Shala from Yablanitsa interrogated Rustum Tetai as a suspected collaborator. This shows that the unified ideal between the accused and the joining together of resources to achieve that end demonstrates their shared intent. On the 4th of March 1998, before the start of the armed conflict, the KLA aim of killing those considered traitors was announced in a communiqué which stated, quote, "Death to enemies and traitors," end quote. Quite simple. That's Jakub Krasniki, P65, page 37, Annex 8 and P67. This aim was restated when on the 6th of July 1998, Jakub Krasniki, then the spokesperson of the KLA on the KLA General Staff, restated that aim in no uncertain terms. He sent out a clear warning to the population at large, stating of collaborators, quote, "We will kill them if they continue to follow the wrong path," end quote. It's P67, transcript reference 3359 to 63. This warning would have been known to the accused. Indeed, the practice of killing opponents was so deep-rooted in Yablanitsa and the Dukagjin area that a euphemism, "take them to Drenica," meaning kill them, had been developed and was known to the KLA soldiers there. Those threats were carried out in reality in Yablanitsa. And as I turn now to deal with the crimes, Your Honours, before I start my summary, and it is a summary, because details are set out fully in our brief, and I don't want to restate everything when Your Honours have it. But before I start, I want to make it clear. The prosecution does not intend to rely on the evidence of witness 81. It invites the Chamber to ignore that evidence as unreliable and treat it as though it was not part of the record. The Chamber should, of course, continue to assess the remainder of the evidence independently and without regard to his evidence. I turn now to deal with the crimes at Yablanitsa. The overwhelming preponderance of the evidence in this case confirms beyond any reasonable doubt that there was a prison in Yablanitsa between at least April 1998 and September 1998. That persons suspected of being Serbian spies, collaborators, or otherwise not supporting the KLA were detained there. That those persons, including witness 3, witness 6, Yarbushati, Skender Kuchi, Pal Krasniki, Nasa Lika, Ivan Zaric, Agron Berisha, Burim Beitia, and the many others named in the indictment, were severely beaten and tortured, and some of them were killed. That Lahi Brahimai and his family were at the center of the mistreatment and abuse, that Idriz Balaj tortured and abused those detained there, and that Ramush Haradinaj supported, encouraged, and otherwise contributed to those crimes. Your Honours, there can be no doubt that between April and September 1998, those who supported, those who did not support the ideals and aims of the KLA were tortured, mistreated, and murdered at the premises in Yablanitsa, known variously as the headquarters, barracks, or prison. The consistent evidence of the witnesses in this case identifies, we submit, the same location and buildings in Yablanitsa as the place containing the prison. Yablanitsa was a secure and remote location suitable for a prison. Difficult to access, Yablanitsa was not overrun by Serb forces until August 1998. Not May 1998, as suggested by the Haradinaj defence at paragraph 34 of their brief, where they refer to 2 VJ combat reports of the 125th Motorised Brigade dated the 20th and 22nd of May, to support the assertion that Serb forces overran Yablanitsa in May. But neither of those documents makes any reference to Yablanitsa. The area of attack referred to is Grabanitsa and villages well to the east of Yablanitsa. And Your Honours may remember that the attack on Grabanitsa was around the 20th of May 1998. Interestingly, those contemporaneous VJ combat reports also contain reference to the abductions of Serbs and of an increase in the number of, quote, intercepting kidnappings and attacks against the civilian population, end quote, by the KLA, as the Serbs called them, terrorists, P115. Your Honours, the prison location in Yablanitsa was in a small plot of land and consisted of only 2 buildings. Your Honours, we should have on your display momentarily not me, but the photograph. I don't know whether Your Honours have that. No. There. Your Honours will remember this. And it's perhaps worthwhile reminding ourselves of what the premises looked like after these many months in trial. There they are. Very simple. A small compound containing 1 house with 4 rooms and a basement. And at the back, along the wall, another wreck in this photograph of a building, but which you have heard evidence contained a kitchen and office. And the gate by the road at the edge of the village. Not a large, overwhelming, multi-building facility, but a small, remote and private location. It was not the kind of place, as emphasized by the Bale and Brahimaj defense in their briefs, where it was possible to not know what was going on. And Your Honours can see why that may be. Indeed, such was the reputation of the prison that its existence was known to the local villagers and to Serbian intelligence. And we direct yourself again to paragraph 90 of our final trial brief for more information. We can take the picture from the screen, thank you. The consistent evidence of those intercepted, kidnapped, and detained in that prison exposes the intolerance and indiscriminate brutality of KLA fighters towards ethnic Albanian, Roma, Gypsy and Serb alike. Such was the intolerance of the KLA towards those it considered opponents, that mere suspicion was enough to see innocent civilians bundled unceremoniously into the trunk of a car and transported to the prison to be accused and beaten over days with sticks and fists. Even those such as Pal Krasniki, mentioned in Count 5, who had attended the prison to join up and fight for the KLA cause, found the finger of accusation pointing at him, resulting in detention and abuse, and in his case, death. Those detained were kept bound like animals, soiling themselves and sleeping in their own excrement and urine, dehumanized and humiliated. The consistent evidence of those detained and beaten in the Brahimai prison places Lahi Brahimai at the heart of the mistreatment. He and other perpetrators were supported and encouraged by other family members, including his brothers Nazmi and Nasser Brahimai, and Ramush Haradinaj, we say his maternal nephew, and were assisted and encouraged by Haradinaj's trusted lieutenant, Idriz Balaj. Evidence of the pattern of abuse in Yablanitsa stretches from the springtime of 1998 into and through the summer of 1998, until Yablanitsa was overrun in August 1998 by Serbian forces. Sometime in the spring of 1998, Yar Bushati, a Kosovar Albanian Muslim civilian, was abducted on the evidence by KLA members near to Smajl. The protected witness confirms that he saw Bushati at the Yablanitsa prison and that he had been severely beaten, and that he was suspected of being a Serbian spy. Shevchet Kabashi also confirms Yar was detained and severely beaten by Lahi Brahimai. Yar's severe injuries and terrible condition were also confirmed by two other protected witnesses. In May 1998, as charged in Count 1, Ivan Zaric, Agron Berisha, and Burim Beitia, three innocent young men described variously as children or boys, who had simply gone together on a horse and cart to mill corn, as they had been doing regularly, had the random misfortune that day to come across the path of KLA soldiers, and were abducted, accused of being spies. They were taken to Yablanitsa. They were again accused of being spies. They were beaten by Lahi Brahimai, Idriz Balaj, and others. They were tortured, they were terrified, and they were humiliated. Idriz Balaj beat all three and sliced off the ear of one. The victims cried for their mothers, urinated in their clothes, and they were, according to the protected witness who observed this beating, beaten black and blue to a pulp. And then Lahi Brahimai and Idriz Balaj ordered that they be taken to Drenica, the euphemism confirmed by Shevchet Kabashi and the protected witness to mean that they would be murdered. All three have never been seen again, and their bodies have never been recovered. Again, around May 1998, the victims of Count 2 disappeared between Dolovo and Grabranitsa, ending up, the prosecution says, in Yablanitsa prison, from whence they disappeared and were never heard of again. In June 1998, Witness 6, the victim in Count 3, a Catholic Kosovar Albanian civilian, was abducted whilst travelling with his family, taken to Yablanitsa prison, and beaten mercilessly for days. His possession of a pistol and a photograph of a retired Albanian policeman in uniform was enough to cause the finger of suspicion to point at him, and for 6 weeks he was detained in Yablanitsa. Lahi Brahimai accused him of being a spy and joined in with his beating. And Witness 6 described his beating in this way, quote, They beat me with baseball bats, with fists. For 2 weeks, I didn't know much of myself. I didn't know where my face was, where my neck was. I was all swollen up because of the beatings." End quote. That's at P84, transcript 5217. Whilst detained in the prison, witness 6 also testified about the mistreatment of the victims of Count 4, namely Nenad Remistar, whom he was detained with and saw beaten with a baseball bat by Nazmi Brahimaj. He, Remistar, has also disappeared and his body has never been recovered. And witness 6 also spoke about a Bosnian man whose crime appears to have been to work for the Serbian state-run electricity company Elektro Kosovo. And also he spoke of 3 Montenegrins. He described how all 4 were beaten with baseball bats, and he described stabbed with knives. All 3 or 4 were taken away after a few days and never seen again. Around the 13th of July 1998, Lahi Brahimaj arrested witness 3, victim in count 5, Kosovo Albanian Muslim. Lahi Brahimaj took him to the prison in Yablanitsa, and there he was accused of being a Serbian supporter. Witness 3 was beaten severely with baseball bats and sticks. He was beaten so badly he could not stand. And Lahi Brahimaj ordered that fellow KLA soldiers practice beating him. And he was brutally beaten again with sticks. And Your Honours may recall his testimony relating to that. At one point, Lahi Brahimaj handed witness 3 a revolver and suggested that he, quote, "Take this, kill yourself, because I don't want to smear my hands with your blood." End quote. Witness 3, transcript 1567-8. Whilst detained, witness 3 also saw Skender Kuci and Paul Krasniki, both Kosovo Albanian civilians, and both victims named in count 5. He was tied with them. They too had been severely beaten. And witness 3 described Kuci being beaten 5 or 6 times a day by Nasa Brahimaj. Witness 6 saw Kuci swollen all over because of the beatings he had received. The protected witness also saw the terrible condition of Skender Kuci and had seen him arrive in the trunk of his own car, as had witness 6. Your Honours, we submit this must have been around the 13th of July 1998, as witness 3 confirmed that this was the approximate start of his ordeal in transcript at 1669. And also witness 6 had said that about 2 weeks before he was released, and he confirmed that his release date was the 25th of July 1998, and that's in P84, transcript 5255. He said that about 2 weeks before he was released, which would take it to around the 13th of July or slightly earlier, that he saw the man, Kuci, arrive in the boot of a Mercedes car. That's at P84 T5231. It's confirmed by the protected witness. And he later discovered that the car was in fact the victim's own car, Mercedes-Benz. Shevchet Kabashi, a KLA soldier based in Yablanitsa, also saw Skender Kuci detained in the prison. Lahi Brahimaj told Kabashi that Kuci was a Serbian spy working for the Serbian State Security Service. The protected witness also heard Lahi Brahimaj and Nazmi Brahimaj accuse Kuci of being a Serbian collaborator. And Your Honours, we submit it is no coincidence that Skender Kuci's name appears on a blacklist of wanted persons circulated by the KLA around the 12th of July 1998. It's Exhibit D212, pages 13 to 14. Kuchi and Krasniki tried to escape with witness 3, but they were both recaptured. Witness 6 and the protected witness, as well as Shevchat Kabashi, between them confirmed that Kuchi and Krasniki were recaptured, returned to the prison, and subjected to a merciless beating. Lawrence, could we briefly, very briefly, move into private session?
May the chamber please move into private session.
Your Honors, we're back in open session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Registrar. Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Your Honour, the fact that Kuchi was detained and that he tried to escape is also confirmed by Rustam Tetay. Kuchi had been so severely beaten that he later died. The protected witness saw Kuchi in such a poor state, and Your Honours may recall his evidence, that he believed he was dead. The defence, of course, challenged this, suggesting that Kuchi was not dead at that point. And whilst the defence seek to make much of the witness's account of the state of the body of Kuchi, it is clear, we submit, on the totality of the evidence, that the witness was merely expressing an opinion based upon what he perceived to be the appalling condition of the body of this man. Witness 3 managed to escape, only to be arrested again a few days later by Lahi Brahimai, who forced him into the trunk of a car, and Your Honours may recall his evidence that he was made to endure a mock execution. I was just returning briefly to deal with Pal Krasniki, who was one of the others detained with witness 3 and with Skender Kuchi. Pal Krasniki, around the 10th of July 1998, had gone to Yablanitsa to join the KLA, but he was arrested as a Serbian spy. He was detained together with witness 3 and Kuchi in the Brahimai prison at Yablanitsa. Witness 3 saw Krasniki and Kuchi being beaten continuously with baseball bats. Witness 6 described the state of the two men as, quote, horrifying. Krasniki could not stand up and was left to soil himself in the clothes that he wore. Krasniki was detained for a considerable period of time until after the 25th of July 1998, at the very earliest, as that was the date witness 6 was released, and he recalls Krasniki still being detained and still alive at that point in the prison. On the 11th of September 1998, Pal Krasniki's body was recovered from the canal leading to the Lake Radonic area, an area we submit controlled by the KLA. And on the available evidence, we submit he must have been executed by the KLA sometime after he was last seen alive in detention on the 25th of July 1998. As I want to deal now with count 6, and I need to move briefly into private session.
May the chamber please move into private session.
Your Honors, we're back in open session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Registrar. Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Your Honours may feel that the critical evidence in this case came from those who were mistreated and abused at the prison. We submit that taken together, they provide a mutually consistent account of the pattern of abuse perpetrated by those members of the KLA in Yablanitsa and beyond. And as to timings, whilst there may be some differences, both within individual witness evidence and when compared together, Your Honours can still be sure that there is a broadly consistent chronology of events. Your Honours, that leads me to make some remarks now relating to the credibility of witnesses. And then I want to turn to make some particular remarks about the protected witness. Dealing firstly with some general observations, and Your Honours, I hope, will forgive me for making these observations to judges used to dealing with cases on a regular basis, but it perhaps bears remembering. Your Honours, clearly there are differences in accounts. Your Honours are entitled to consider the passage of time that has elapsed between 1998 and 2012 some 14 years, and how those natural differences may be exacerbated when the proceedings are unfamiliar and in a language that is not your own. Inevitably, time will have taken its toll, but while some details may fall victim to the passage of time, the witnesses still recall the main events impressed on their minds with clarity. Where they are perhaps confused about dates for specific events, Your Honours can look to other evidence in the record to confirm when those events about which they speak must have occurred. Your Honours are entitled to consider the stress and fear Kosovo Albanian witnesses may have in testifying in this case. Your Honours will recognise that most of the critical witnesses have protective measures. Those measures in place as a result of an objective assessment of their security issues and of what was required for their protection. If a witness had been relocated, likewise would have been an independent assessment of that necessity. In relation to the protected witness in particular, Your Honours will recall the manner and length of time over which he testified, and you will bear in mind, no doubt, his demeanour. He testified over a number of full days, in difficult circumstances, Your Honours may feel. You are entitled to consider the extent to which any anxiety may have abated over the days he testified, in determining whether such anxiety may have affected the answers given in the early part of his testimony, where they appear to conflict with answers given later in his testimony. Your Honours will recall how he spoke about what he saw and the effect that it clearly had on him, particularly in relation to his account of the events relating to the 3 young men. He was subjected to lengthy cross-examination in which he was accused of fabricating his accounts and of acting for monetary gain. You will recall how he testified in response, and you will recall a similar attack being made on witness 3, and how he responded when it was suggested he was cooperating with the prosecution simply for gain. Both these witnesses rejected those allegations. And Your Honours, I want to deal with how they dealt with that, but as that was in private session, I need to go into private session.
May the Chamber please move to private session.
Your Honours, we're in open session.
Thank you, Mr. Registrar. Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Your Honours, neither of these men wanted to leave their homes and their families. Their hearts lie in Kosovo, the home of their fathers and their forefathers. They had lived happily with their extended families, as is the Albanian culture, and now they live away from that, cut off from all that they had been brought up to know. So too their wives and their children. It is said that they would trade all of that in exchange for lies, to compromise themselves so utterly as to make return home impossible. Your Honours, the reality is that they traded their homes, their families, and their livelihoods because honesty, integrity, and truth were more important than their own safety, more important than their homes and their friends and their surroundings. A higher calling to do what is right. Your Honours are entitled to weigh those circumstances positively when assessing the reliability of these witnesses. Your Honours, I want to turn now to make some specific remarks concerning the protected witness. I wish to cover 5 particular areas. First, some issues relating to count 1. Secondly, relating to a number of arrests. Thirdly, relating to Skender Kuchi. Fourthly, witness 6. and then witness 3 and Shevchet Kabashi. When I've concluded that, I will move on to make some general remarks about the use of unadmitted documents and evidence, and conclude this particular topic with some comments about the assessment of evidence generally. Your Honours, the defence attacked the protected witness as unreliable, inconsistent, contradictory, and lacking support. But in truth, there is a great deal of consistency.
I do apologise, but if Mr. Rogers is going to make generalised submissions by reference to the defence, he ought to distinguish between which defence he is referring to, because he's not summarising submissions made by Mr. Haradinaj.
I make it broadly. He is attacked, I put it that way, as unreliable, inconsistent, contradictory, and lacking support. I'm not sure whether Mr. Emerson's suggesting he's not unreliable, inconsistent, or contradictory. But in truth, there is a great deal of consistency in his evidence, and much support from the other witnesses, especially when considering the 14 years that have elapsed since they all witnessed these events. And as I'll turn now to deal with the 5 specific issues I mentioned. Firstly, in relation to count 1, I'm just going to make 3 points and then we'll need to go into private session. In relation to count 1, we submit there can be no doubt from the evidence that the 3 young men in count 1, aged 22, 15 and 16, left the village of Dolok together on a horse-drawn cart. There can be no doubt that they went to Glllarevë to mill corn and that they never returned. And may we now turn into private session. And I will be a little while now in private session.
May the Chamber please move to the private session.
With regard to the
Your
last
Honours,
remark,
we are in open session. Thank you.
excuse me, with regard to the last remark made by Mr. Rogers, that's a clear example of burden shifting, which is impermissible argument.
Is this a convenient time?
Your Honours, yes, it is a convenient time.
We'll take a break and come back at 4 o'clock.
All rise, fearful away.